6.4 million debris. Greetings from the void, I'm Tinril, and this video will be a data-heavy analysis of ancient debris. If you don't care how the sausage is made and just want a get-started guide making use of conclusions drawn from this information, I have a separate video with that focus that you can access from this card or in the video description. Minecraft continues to release new versions. I don't want to make a new video with every new update, so I'll host a living document that shows the differences between versions linked in the video description. This can be updated for new versions to help determine if any changes have made this analysis invalid. This information is known to be good for versions 118 through 120, and potentially for later versions as they come out. Ancient debris came out in version 116, years ago, and there is almost no reliable information about it. It remains a mystery. Until now. I have lots to share, and you don't even know what you don't know. I watched a few videos on how to find ancient debris back on version 118. I was prepared with all the best ways to find it. My results didn't align with what I had seen. Far from it. I couldn't determine if I was the unluckiest person in the world, or if I had been spoon-fed some staged, cheaty bullshit. My expectations were clearly set too high, but there wasn't a known standard to gauge anything against. Frustrated and a little angry, I did what anybody else would have done. Wrote a program to parse the Minecraft worlds and find all of the debris. There are a number of chapters in this video, but they are mostly self-contained. Feel free to skip around to whatever interests you. More than 4.1 million chunks of the Nether have been parsed across versions 116 to 120, and more than 6.4 million debris has been found. A variety of factors were recorded for every debris discovered, and details of every block in the Nether for 1.3 million chunks was also collected. Even though version 120 is the latest, the focus will be on 119 data since I have the most of it, and it's the same. 2.6 million 119 chunks were scanned from 10 worlds and 5 different seeds. 4 million debris was found, giving an average of 1.5 debris per chunk. 2 million chunks contained debris, so 22% of chunks had no debris and 78% of chunks had an average of 2 debris. Ancient debris spawns in Y levels 6 through 120 inclusive, and the richest Y layer is 16. Here's a chart showing the vertical distribution and a table of the percentages for each Y level. Chunks with debris contained 1 to 8, with the frequencies shown in this table. 34% of debris chunks had 2 debris, and 27% of debris chunks contained 3 or more. 8 was very rare, occurring in only 1 of the 5 seeds. Here's an example of a chunk with 8 debris in it. There are 2 up at Y100 and 101, 3 down at Y23, 1 at Y17 as part of a group that crosses the chunk border, and 2 down at Y9 and 10 that are also part of a group that crosses the chunk border. The frequency for a chunk with 8 debris in it was 1 chunk in 1.3 million. Ancient debris spawns from basalt, blackstone, and netherrack. By combining the Y distributions of those with the Y distribution of ancient debris, we can get an idea of what the potential to become debris is. Here's a chart comparing the potential for debris to the realized debris. For the Y distribution at least, there isn't a correlation between the potential for debris and the actual debris. Ancient debris can be found in Bastion Remnant chests. Generic chests have a 13.5% chance for 1, Hogland stable chests have a 5.7% chance for 2, and treasure room chests have a 12.7% chance for 2 as well. Every chunk with debris is surrounded by 8 other chunks. Here's a table showing how often those other chunks also contained debris. Debris chunks were surrounded by 7 to 8 other debris chunks 48% of the time, and 3 debris chunks or fewer less than 2.7% of the time. Here's a visual representation of debris chunks from one of the world seeds. 512 chunks by 512 chunks. Debris chunks are in black, and non-debris chunks are in white. Every debris is surrounded by 26 other blocks, 6 blocks that connect at a face, and 20 blocks that connect at an edge or a corner. Data was collected for both of these situations, 1 set of data for each. Here's a table showing the blocks found connected at an edge or a corner around debris and their frequencies. And here's a table showing blocks found connected at a face around debris and their frequencies. From the combined raw data of both cases, I can tell you 2 things. First, 59% of the time debris is connected to other debris, it will be at a face, and 41% of the time it will be connected at an edge or a corner, potentially being hidden. Second, gravel makes up 0.17% of total blocks found around debris. Don't mine it unless it's in your way or you want some. Fire, brown mushroom, and air are highlighted because I wanted to show an example of each. A seed and location won't be provided for these because there's a small amount of variance in debris for recreated worlds of the same seed, and these situations would also require the other elements to also be created in the same way to connect to the debris. Here we've got quite a few fires going on, and beneath two of these flaming netherrack, well, two of them are actually debris, likely having replaced flaming netherrack. Here we've got a field of brown and red mushrooms. Hidden beneath one of them is an ancient debris. It's not all that hidden. This debris is exposed to air, but you can tell from the shearing that it wasn't natural. This debris was likely covered by basalt or netherrack and was exposed by the creation of a bastion remnant. These three items were shown because it shows that debris likely spawns after blocks like fire and mushrooms, but before structures like fortresses and bastion remnants. Here's a table showing how often debris was found in connected groups, which I'll call clusters, of sizes 1 to 6. 59% of debris is connected to more debris. As mentioned earlier, 59% of the time this debris will connect at a face, and 41% of the time it will connect at an edge or a corner. 99.9% of debris was found in groupings of 3 or less, meaning that the natural generation likely occurs up to size 3, and larger cluster sizes would be a combination of smaller generations being close enough to touch. If we look at the clusters themselves instead of the debris participation in clusters, here's a table showing that. This table also shows that 16% of clusters occurred across a chunk border, as well as the percentage of each cluster size that crossed the chunk border. As the cluster size increases, so does the percentage of that cluster that crosses the chunk border, suggesting a number of the larger clusters are likely created by two different clusters in different chunks that connect at the border. The largest chunk-constrained cluster size found was 5, with 37% of size 5 clusters not crossing the chunk border. 100% of size 6 clusters found crossed the chunk border. Here's an example of one. In this case, it is likely a size 3 cluster generation on either side of the chunk border that is connected. The frequency for size 6 clusters was 1 chunk in 146,000. Here's an example of a chunk with what looks like 4 unique debris generations that are fully chunk constrained. I was able to find this example by looking through a small number of debris chunks, so it might be possible to find more than 4 generations. The wiki says that there can be 2 generations within a chunk, one up to size 3 and one up to size 2. The potential max of 5 is supported by both the cluster analysis and the 4 blob example. But the 4 blob example suggests there are either more than 2 generations possible, or blobs don't need to be continuous. You should mind your chunk borders, there's more debris there. Almost every video on debris and tons of comment backseat drivers make this claim, but is it true? Here's a chart showing the frequency of the X and Z chunk relative coordinates. Mining any one given point would reveal more on either side of the mine, so keep in mind that any mining profile would be a combination of these points. You can see that Z in particular lifts up at the end, but we want to compare a number of combinations and see how the non-chunk border positions compare. Here's an example of a 4-wide chunk border profile, additionally revealing a block on the left and the right shown in glass. This profile is made up of the chunk relative positions 13, 14, and 15 on the left chunk, and 0, 1, and 2 on the right chunk. The values for these coordinates will be added together, and the profile will be shifted 1 position to the right. These values will be added, and the position will shift again until all 16 combinations have been considered. Profile widths of 2 and 4 will be considered, and the combinations will then be sorted from highest to lowest and compared. Every coordinate is made up of a combination of both an X value and a Z value. So for this comparison, we'll decouple X and Z and analyze them individually. If we freeze in some X values, this represents a shifting Z value or a north to south direction. If we freeze in some Z values, this represents a shifting X value or an east to west direction. Looking at the results for moving north to south, the 2-wide chunk border profile places 9th and the center of the chunk places 3rd. The chunk border profile is worse than the center of the chunk, lower than the best combination, and below the average combination by 0.0229%. Looking at the 4-wide profile, the chunk border places 14th and the center of the chunk places 1st. The chunk border profile is worse than the center of the chunk, lower than the best combination, and below the average combination by 0.0632%. Looking at the results from moving east to west, the 2-wide chunk border profile places 2nd and the center of the chunk places 12th. The chunk border profile is better than the center of the chunk, lower than the best combination, and above the average combination by 0.1053%. Looking at the 4-wide border profile, the chunk border places 1st, and the center of the chunk places 11th. The chunk border profile is better than the center of the chunk, it is the best combination, and it is above the average combination by 0.1424%. I consider chunk borders being better to be something that is now disproven. There is slight variance depending on your position and the direction that you're facing, but on both the positive and negative end of things, the magnitude is so small as to be meaningless. If chunk borders aren't better, why are there so many people making videos confirming that they are? If you consider this statement, mining a few wide at a chunk border is more efficient at finding debris than mining a full chunk, there's a kernel of truth that I think might be partially responsible for the staying power of this myth, but it has nothing to do with chunk borders and it has nothing to do with debris. Here's a 2x1 mining profile shown in regular glass that additionally reveals 6 exterior blocks, shown in black glass. This is a ratio of 1 block mined to 3 blocks revealed. If we expand the mining profile to be 2x2, this turns into a ratio of 1 block mined to 2 blocks revealed. The ratio decreased. If we consider mining a full chunk, that would be a ratio of 1 block mined to 1.125 blocks revealed. The larger the combined mining profile, the less efficient it is at revealing blocks, compared to a smaller mining profile. Some of you may have used this method when looking for diamonds in the long ago times. Here's a bar chart showing how the world distribution of biomes compares to the biome distribution of debris and a table of the values. From this, we can do some maths to determine how to compare the density of debris in one biome to another with respect to the world biome distribution. Here's that table. You can read this table by looking at a cell where a column biome and a row biome intersect. The column biome will have a debris density that much greater than the row biome. I've also included the percentage of each biome made up of basalt, blackstone, netherrack, and debris, the potential to become debris. It didn't matter for the Y distribution, but I would like to think that it matters for something. Looking at the potential for debris and the realized debris, the Soul Sand Valley, Warped Forest, Crimson Forest, and Basalt Deltas are all in the same relative positions to each other. The Nether Wastes, however, has the second highest potential and comes in 4th for the actual debris. I would guess that the potential has an impact for the biome distribution, and maybe the Nether Wastes has some kind of penalty being applied against it. We can apply the relative biome density weights to the Y distribution of debris by biome. Here's a chart showing that. The Basalt Deltas peak the highest and the Soul Sand Valley peaks the lowest. You can see that the Soul Sand Valley has a more dramatic decline after the peak compared to the other biomes, and the Basalt Delta doesn't fall as low through the bend around Y25. Basalt Deltas might have the highest concentration of debris, but 86% of Y15 to 16 in the Basalt Deltas are basalt and blackstone, and 6.9% is lava. Basalt and blackstone have more than 3 times the hardness of netherrack, so a potential 6% increase in debris compared to the mid-tier biomes will not balance out the increased mining times. Nether Wastes, Warped Forest, and Crimson Forest are the best biomes to mine, and they're all very close together. The largest variance between any 2 of them is between the Nether Wastes and the Crimson Forests, and that's only 0.571%. I confirmed there was variance between worlds of the same seed back when I was looking for rare cases of fire, air, and mushrooms in recreated worlds. Comparing worlds of the same seed, I learned that they are kind of like a Venn diagram. A large portion of the debris between the worlds will exist in the same exact locations, but each world will be missing debris other worlds contain while having new debris not found in other worlds. The percentage of debris that remains the same is quite high, however, so a diagram like this would be more accurate. Uncertain of how great the variance between worlds was, I decided to parse 64 regions of 3 worlds each for each version of the game. or 196,608 chunks for each version. From these, I compared World 1 to World 2, World 1 to World 3, and World 2 to World 3, to sample 3 variant sizes for each game version. There were also 4 other pairs of 119 worlds not being used for the version comparison, so I came up with 19 total samples of variants. These were then used to determine the average and minimum variance for debris amounts between worlds of the same seed, to help give context when determining what might have changed between versions. Here's a table of things I thought would be worth tracking between versions. The 116 values are in red, and the values for each version after show how much changed relative to version 116. I thought it would be easier for everything to be compared to a single frame of reference rather than for every version to be compared to every other version. Yellow cells indicate that value decreased from the previous version, green indicates that value increased from the previous version, and blue cells indicate the value stayed the same as the previous version. You can also see that I have a separate table comparing 118 and 119 to 120. Here you can see I determined the minimum, average, and maximum values for variance between worlds of the same seed. If there's a total debris change that's greater than the maximum, it will likely indicate an actual change and not just variance. The drop in total debris amount is about 2.9% since 116. It dropped in 117 and again in 118. The volume of chunks containing debris has dropped by about 2.8%, dropping in 117 and again in 118. The average amount of debris in debris chunks has dropped by about 0.12%, dropping in 117 and then increasing in 118, so it's better than 117 but still worse than 116 was. The spawnable potential decreased in 118 by about 1.9%, and the richest Y level changed from 15 in 116 to 16 in 117. To consider the 5 best Y levels, we need to remember that 117 shifted everything up 1, so the best 116 Y levels will be 13 through 17, and those will be compared to levels 14 through 18 for all later versions. The total percentage of the 5 best Y levels has decreased by about 2.8%. You can see a decrease across the board in 117, and then a mix of increases and decreases in 118 that are still below the 116 values. And these distributions have remained pretty consistent through 118 to 120. The total number of debris found in chunks decreased for 1, 3, 4, and 7 amounts, while increasing for 2, 5, and 6 amounts. As with most of these values, you can see 117 changed, 118 changed again, and then 118 through 120 is pretty consistent. Looking at the cluster sizes, there are consistent trends both up and down, but these have basically not changed since 116 since the differences are so small. The percentage of clusters that cross a chunk border can be seen to fluctuate here. There is actually a much larger variance that can be seen when looking at the values for individual worlds rather than the averages. There's a play of a few percent here, generally moving between 15% and 18%. I wouldn't say there's anything to indicate a particular trend. There isn't much to see for the biome distribution. There was a decrease in basalt deltas and crimson forests, balanced out by an increase in the nether wastes, soul sand valley, and warped forests. This distribution changed in 118 and has stayed the same ever since. This table comparing 118 and 119 to 120 just helps emphasize how consistent everything has stayed for the last few versions. To try and get a sense of the best way to find debris, let's define a model. The average chunk contains 1.5271 debris, but we don't care about the whole chunk. The 4 richest layers are Y14 to 17. If we consider mining through Y15 and 16 for a whole chunk, we can multiply the sum of the Y14 to 17 percentage range, plus 1 revealed above and below, times 1.5271. In this example, the gray blocks represent the mining profile, and the blue blocks represent what is additionally revealed. This gives us about 0.468 debris if we mined an entire chunk through Y15 and 16. Our full chunk model, however, would also reveal debris on either side. So let's multiply the Y15 and 16 percentages by 18 over 16 to account for that. While there are additional reveal blocks in front of and behind the mining profile, for the most part, I'll just consider the full mining profile an extended tunnel and ignore them. With the updated percentages, mining a full chunk through Y15 and 16 would reveal an estimated 0.49935 debris. 1 divided by 0.49935 gives us an estimate of 2.002 chunks required to be mined to obtain one debris. The amount of work here would be 2 high by 16 wide by 16 deep times the 2.0026 chunks, or 1,025 blocks. Before I go any further, there are 2 reasons why your actual experience will outperform any of these estimates. First, cluster debris that extends beyond the mining profile. This is a small bonus in your favor that will accumulate the more you mine, kind of like the house edge at a casino. Second, lava. Debris doesn't spawn in lava, and you generally won't mine through a lake of lava. If you consider a scenario with 16 chunks in a 4x4 grid, mining through Y15 and 16 for all 16 chunks would get you about 7.99 debris on average. If the top right 4 chunks were lava, however, you'd actually only clear out 12 of the 16 chunks, giving you 7.99 debris for only 12 chunks of work. This effectively changes the debris per chunk from around 1/2 to about 2/3. To try and account for the lava in the model, I'll simply reduce the amount of work to a lower bound by the percentage of those mine levels that were lava. Our final updated model for mining an entire chunk through Y15 to 16 is now 949 to 1,025 blocks of work for each debris. This is my proposed way of setting expectations. Unlike the debris per hour metric, the pickaxe quality, enchantments, and other random factors are irrelevant here. With this model set, we can change the mining profile to compare different situations. Here's the comparison of a full chunk versus a single 2x1 tunnel. You can see I've also included some grading for 3 things I think are worth considering: the revealed debris amount, the mining chunk depth per debris, and the work required per debris. Mining a 2x1 tunnel through Y15 and 16 maintains a good mined to revealed ratio and happens to be the most efficient way to mine for debris. This can be infinitely expanded horizontally. The efficiency doesn't change, but additional parallel tunnels will capitalize on a larger area of previously revealed blocks from other tunnels and decrease the chunk depth required to find a debris. The percentage of debris in Y17 is very close to that of Y15, so you might wonder if mining a 3x1 tunnel would be better. This wouldn't be a terrible idea. It would increase the revealed debris by 1.38%, but also increase the estimated work by 55 to 59 blocks because of the reduced mine to revealed ratio. If you don't mind a reduction of efficiency for a higher percentage of found debris, consider this profile. The 2x1 mines can be shifted and stacked to account for 2 different mine levels. This profile can also be tiled, and compared to a string of 2x1 tunnels will reveal 6.58% more potential debris for only 22 to 23 more blocks mined per debris. I would mine the upper portion first so you don't have potential pitfalls that could exist if you mined the lower portion first. I've manually uncovered thousands of debris using various profiles, beds, and TNT. I always come back to this profile and it never disappoints. If you want netherrack, nether quartz, and nether gold in addition to debris, here's an inefficient mining option that will uncover more than 57% of potential debris. I wouldn't consider this method unless you have a mending pickaxe and a fast way to fully repair it, and a lot of time. I would suggest mining the upper portion before the lower for this as well, for the same reasons as before. For an idea of what the impact would be if you didn't mine through Y15 and 16 as the best, here's something showing the impact of that compared to a string of 2x1 tunnels. Mining 1 higher at Y16 to 17 changes very little, adding only 1 to 2 extra work per debris. Mining 1 lower at Y14 to 15 adds an estimated 43 to 46 blocks mined per debris, and mining 2 higher at Y17 to 18 adds an estimated 49 to 54 blocks per debris. The penalty for not being optimal isn't too high, but you might as well go for all the advantages that you can find. What about beds, TNT, or my preferred mining technique? I've decided that these are out of scope for this analysis video. It's already kind of long, but they're covered in my Get Started video. Well, that's enough for me. Thank you for watching. No call to action. I just hope this video helped you out in some way and I was able to set some reasonable expectations. If you get frustrated while starting out, don't let it get to you and just give it more time. Or cheat. No, don't cheat. Just mine off camera. Later.